Which job has, hands down, the worst impact on mental health? Story 1. The FBI evidence sifters in child sex cases. Weeks of freeze-framing children's faces during abuse videos and matching that to databases to identify the kids against other videos, missing children, etc. Then putting it all in a timeline for prosecutors. Story 2. My dad is an oncologist. He handles it well, but that has to be up there. Every time you meet a new patient, it's during one of the worst, if not the worst, time of their lives. And it's up to you to break it to them, their families, if the toxic treatment you have been administering is working, or if they should give up hope and get their affairs in order. On top of that, you have them attending appointments, telling you the kind of toll the cancer is taking on their marriage. So many people walk away from their beloved partner of 30 years rather than support them through this. Not to mention their finances. Story 3. It's not the worst, but being an inner-city public school teacher broke me. Look, again, not as bad as those others, but I've seen and read enough that my decade in has been enough. I've had students murdered. One kid was shot for $12 worth of weed. I also taught the murderer. I've called DCS on many parents because my student came in beaten or starving. I paid for one of my students' lunches because she was pregnant and couldn't afford school lunch. Seen brutal fights that have ended with hospitalization, and have also been hospitalized due to breaking up fights. You watch brilliant students discover drugs and overdose. You see kids with bright futures get pregnant and refuse to go to college because they will be supported by the baby's father, who skipped town the day she gave birth, and you see kids fall through the cracks in the system to never be seen again. I've also reported 2 freaking pervert teachers. One didn't have enough evidence, but he was still let go while the other currently enjoys prison. My first year, a few of us teachers started a club that would have lock-ins at the school because some of the kids needed a place to get food, get clean, and be away from the danger of home. I've never played more Monopoly in my life or eaten more Papa John's, and I really didn't like doing it, but it was worth it at graduation when one of my students that never missed club thanked me because it was the one night her mom's boyfriend couldn't get her. I still cry about it. I'm crying now. There were amazing positives. I have a few students that are now doctors that were once told that they would never graduate. Getting kids who couldn't read at the beginning of their freshman year to graduate with a full ride to college is a feeling that I can't really compare to anything. But at the end of the day, the lows are too low. I left the first school that I taught at 6 years ago because we had an incident. That definitely wasn't a school shooting that failed only because the kid turned the corner directly into our school officer. And out of fear, the kid killed himself instead of the kids on his list. I should have left then, but I thought it would get better, that I could handle it all. I can't. I'm tired. Story 4. Crime scene cleanup. Entire families murder-suicide. Seeing dead babies would wreck me. The smells. Bodies turned to soup. Brains splattered. Blood, lots of blood. Feces and urine. Pets taking a chomp because they haven't been fed. Having to pull all carpet, pad, and scrub subfloors. Extracting body juices. High probability of bio-illnesses, biohazards, blood airborne pathogens. 100% will affect a sane person. Story 5. I don't know if it's the worst, but maybe. I'm a retired detective. In the latter part of my career, I was tasked with running our Special Investigations Unit. One of our responsibilities was computer crimes. 95% of those were child sexual abuse media investigations, child porn to the layperson. I trained and got certified in computer forensics. As a result, I spent many hours poring through thousands upon thousands of child sexual abuse images and videos. The seething white rage that would build up inside of me would necessitate an occasional break to go punch a wall or other inanimate object. The other detectives outside of our enclosed lab got used to the occasional outbursts by my other computer forensic examiners and me. Most of the time I could endure it, but sometimes certain acts or victims would trigger rage in me that still affects me to this day. This in spite of the mandatory and regular therapy for our examiners that was established by policy. There is no redemption for people who abuse children. Story 6. I have a friend who works for CPS. You wouldn't believe the number of times she's tried to get a child taken out of a horribly abusive home. Clear physical evidence of sexual abuse, etc. But the case falls through because the police won't provide a detective who is good with children. Then the child won't repeat accusations for official testimony. It's got to be up there with first responders. Story 7. Caregiver. Firstly, the racist. It's very hard to go on with your day taking care of someone who spits in your face and calls you dirty while you're trying to help them wash up. Secondly, the way people just die after you finally had a relationship with them and cared for them for months and how fast that empty bed gets occupied. You don't get any counseling or therapy, but you're expected to go on normally with your work shift. Story 8. Wildland firefighters, no one really talks about it, But since it's a part of my field of study, my instructor, who's been on a few hotshot crews and knows so many people in the wildland firefighting industry who have just ended their lives. You work 14-hour days for 2 weeks or more of some of the most physically demanding work anyone can do. Usually can't shower, you're actively watching nature, including all its creatures being burned alive, moving their corpses, and possibly watching it destroy people's homes and lives. Not only that, but at any moment something can change and you'll burn alive in the fire too. It's not for the weak of heart, because even those who have the toughest hearts are struggling with depression. Story 9. This pales in comparison to the first comment, but here's one. Probation parole officers. We get to know their whole families. We cheer them on when they succeed. We move heaven and earth to put things in place for success. No one talks about it, but when they pass away to violence and drugs, it hurts. I don't know if people truly know how bad the fentanyl crisis is. Story 10. I spent a summer as a legal intern in the homicide division of the Orange County DA, and much of my job that summer was to review and catalog photos of the victims and crime scenes. Disproportionately children, since it was a job that no one really wants to do, so it's easy to pass off to interns. I have no idea how anyone does that long term. A few months was more than enough for a lifetime. Story 11. It's not the worst, but my mother used to deliver Meals on Wheels. It's a program in the good states to deliver food to the elderly or homebound. She saved a few people in distress and found her share of dead folks, which sucks. She was often the only person some of those people would see each day. It was heartbreaking, and she did it when she was even eligible to receive the meals as she was elderly. I lost her to COVID because stupid people ran our country. Story 12. I find the profession of a veterinarian to be mentally very challenging. I believe people choose to study it because they love animals very much. However, they have to euthanize them. Sometimes even completely healthy animals brought in by irresponsible owners who no longer want to care for them. I also once read that veterinarians have one of the highest suicide rates among professions. Story 13. Food service workers. Constantly dehumanized, treated like garbage even when service is damn near perfect. Injuries are common but brushed over because you don't have time to be injured. And despite having shit wages, people will complain about having to tip as if we're just greedy workers. Had a genuine panic attack in the kitchen because me and my one coworker, were rushed, and everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. Customers were awful before I even had a chance to mess up. People often complain about the prices despite them being that way as a small business that almost went under during the start of the pandemic. And because we are paid $9 an hour compared to the usual $2 to $7 wages most baristas make everywhere else. However, $9 is still not a living wage. I only afford groceries and some of the rent because of the tip money I make. I like to think I'm a kind person who has faith in humanity, because I know not everyone is mean or evil. But when you're exposed to such a general part of the population and constantly abused as a staff member by customers, it's hard to keep that positive worldview and has definitely sent me into mental health spirals. Maybe we don't have it worse compared to firefighters or specific FBI evidence workers, but I'm a firm believer that the world would be a kinder place if everyone was required to work 2 years in the food service industry or 3 years in customer service retail. Story 14. Farming. Trust me. Work as hard as you can. Do everything as correctly as possible. Live frugally. Be resourceful as you can. Weather, pests, equipment failure, repair, and commodity prices wipe out your chances of any reasonable profit or profit at all. Sit with your accountant and banker and be told again and again how much of a total failure you are, and that if you're going to get ahead in this world, you're just going to have to work harder. Meanwhile, they go home after a hard 6 hours at work, and you head right back to the field to work until dark. I was an automation engineer once, worked a reasonable amount of hours, and was well paid for it. Then, for personal family reasons, I started farming. I had to do it. This is freaking peasant work according to my accountant and banker, but it's infinitely more difficult than being an engineer ever was. Story 15. Definitely not number 1, but a lawyer who does family law. Good friend of mine did it for a while. He said that all of his clients were simply deep down angry, and their anger and bitterness overrode their normal sense of reason. They won't listen to the lawyers very much and will behave totally irrationally at times no matter what. Story 16. I've heard trucking is really bad. Read about it in an article recently. They have to be away from home for days, if not weeks at a time. It's really difficult to hold down a relationship or family in any way. A good portion of their time on the job is spent in a perpetual state of exhaustion. Coffee, Red Bull, and other caffeinated beverages are being used 24/7 to keep them awake long enough to finish the trip. Never a good night's rest, as you just sleep in whatever motel you find along the road or just in the cabin of your vehicle. Not to mention that driving a vehicle for that long is physically exhausting. Imagine holding your arms up in front of you for 6 to 8 hours a day, every day of the week. Story 17. I've been a cop for only 2 years. I can never see people the same again. And I've experienced more stress in that time than I have my whole life. And I've already seen way more than you would imagine. Everything about the job sucks. The schedule is terrible. I never see my family or old friends. I go from 0 to 100 on stress about 10 times a night. Unfortunately, I also work in a big city. Everyone hates me, and for some reason, it's become socially acceptable to be openly racist towards me. Every person I talk to is constantly lying to me. Even the people who called me for help because they want someone to get in trouble badly enough. When 1 out of 10,000 cops does finally make a mistake 5 states over, I have to pay for it with everyone's hate. I just wanted to save lives, and I already have saved more than I thought I would. But it's become so hard to put my vest on and get myself to work lately. And it crushes me to see some of my friends making 3x my salary, working 6 hours a day from home while I'm out here in the trenches every night. Every decision I make affects somebody's entire life and freedom, or could cost me or my coworker's life. The amount of red tape I have to go through to do my job is insane. Most of the criminals I break my back to capture get released the next day or get let go in court on some stupid technicality. Nobody wants the job I have anymore, so there are never enough coworkers to help me. We are always understaffed, and by the time I show up to the lower priority calls, I'm met with hate because the response time is so bad. I get to hear Karen scream in my face about showing up hours later to her broken car window, even though 15 minutes ago I just got done watching Jimmy gurgle his last breath succumbing to stab wounds while his mom looks on in horror. Even if I quit tonight, I believe most of my naive innocence and optimism for life could be shattered, and the mental health effects could last me for the rest of my life. And the weird cherry on top is that I've become kind of addicted to the adrenaline, and activities that used to excite me in my non-working life can sometimes feel mundane and purposeless now. Story 18. Customer service. I've never been more miserable than having people yell at me over things I don't control or fix. People just blatantly look down on you because you're there to serve them. Some people are just so rude and angry straight off the bat. I've been in tears before over the way some people have spoken to me. I've even had people say, "I know it's not your fault," and then proceed to keep yelling at me. I've taken to just saying, "I'm here to help you, and the way you're behaving is making me not want to help you." That usually either gets them to calm down or gets a worse reaction. Honestly, just the complete lack of empathy or human kindness. I understand whatever happened is inconvenient or you think it's wrong, but I don't deserve it to be spoken to like a piece of crap over it. I've even been threatened with violence. Obviously, there's first responders, nurses, veterinarians, and sectors of Crime Stoppers that would be much more mentally taxing and traumatizing than customer service ever will be. And I'm so thankful for the people that do those jobs and take on that mental load. Story 19. Any call center-based customer service job I say could do this. Personally, I worked for a retirement plan call center. During 2007-2010, the global recession, I was basically the equivalent of a grocery store cashier on the phone. I couldn't tell you what to invest in, you or your broker would tell me, and I would do the transaction for you. Your grocery store cashier isn't going to cook you dinner. I'm not going to pick your investments. I wouldn't know how to back then anyway. The toll it has on your mental health is staggering. Colleagues and I would get off the phone wanting nothing to do with it, but we'd immediately start venting to each other about what happened to us. You'd never want to hear someone else's story, but always want to vent your own. Friends and family outside the job can't stand to be around you because you would bitch about the job for an hour at least when you meet up with them. It took significant mental training to try and separate work and life for many employees. Customers don't realize there's an actual person on the other end of the phone. They treat you like absolute dog shit and will blame you for anything. I got blamed for Obama, Bush, Christmas, the stock market, the government, subprime mortgages. I don't even know what those are nor work with them. The Russian mafia, that was a fun one. Still trying to figure that one out. Mistakes third-party brokers made themselves. I literally had brokers call me for mistakes they made themselves and try to pin it on me when I had nothing but hard-written evidence to show they did it. The only good thing about this one is most of them never lasted and would be fired soon. During the global recession, I would look non-stop for another job. I didn't want to quit without having another job first, but the market was non-existent. I dreamed of finding a job off the phone and out of customer service, and would have literal nightmares of the beep you hear when a customer call starts. Depression would hit hard when you feel there's no escape. The difference between my colleagues and I is that while we all hated the job and wanted to move on, most of them became complacent and would bitch about the job every day, but do nothing to move on. Story 20. Both my parents were police officers. My father for 20 plus years. Honestly, I don't think it's the worst job out there, but it definitely screwed with their perspective of the world permanently. They saw and dealt with so many absolutely ruined people, or ones who just ruined their lives or even worse, ruined others. My dad to this day is quite pessimistic when it comes to strangers. So many times assumes the worst. But I get it. Of course, all the death they saw was grueling as well. My father was some kind of specialist for a while in dead bodies. They are very supportive of me choosing any career, but from the day I could speak, they have always told me, you can be anything you want, but we will never allow you to be a cop, as kind of like a half joke. But I take this advice from them quite seriously. Now they have both moved on. Mom runs a tailoring business and dad is a history teacher.